So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me here and for giving me this opportunity to present some research and to talk about this, definitely the underrated role of urban blue spaces in supporting health and well-being. And what I'm going to talk about is related to an EU project that I was involved with, together with many other universities. And I should mention at this point that as well as being Professor of Landscape and Wellbeing at the University of Edinburgh, I'm also Chair Professor of Landscape Architecture at the Estonian University of Life Sciences. And the particular project of Blue Health was actually part of my Estonian life, but there's a blurry boundary between working in the two institutions. And I can talk about the Edinburgh side of things, and I can talk about the Estonian side of things, and in many respects they are linked together. So I'll talk about the issues to do with blue space, and particularly why it was necessary to get into this kind of area of research, because it was underrated and overlooked until this project really came along. So before Blue Health, the project, there was lots and lots of work that I'd also been involved with, linking natural environments and improved health, whether it's physical, psychological, mental, or social. And that work particularly to do with forests and other kinds of green spaces. And often when you looked at papers or publications talking about green space, water bodies were often a minor element of green spaces, rather than a significant type of infrastructure, natural infrastructure, in their own right. So there was lots of work about green spaces, about forests, about parks, gardens, and so on. But water, as I mentioned, was just really a kind of incidental part of any typology that there was about that. So at this point of the project, where it was the mid-2000s, the mid-teens, 20-teens, we, the consortium that came together to propose this project, felt that it was really high time that blue spaces became the subject of research in their own right. And Europe became a really perfect test bed for dealing with this subject. And why? Well, in Europe, there's over 91,000 kilometers of coastline, and it's related to several different kinds of sea, like the Atlantic, the North Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, the Baltic Sea, and the Black Sea. Each of them very, very different climatically. The kind of sea, some are tidal, some are not. Some have big, powerful storms, others tend not to have. Some are very popular for holidays and vacation and beach holidays and all of these kinds of things. But not only that, there's 194 coastal cities. And over 50% of the population live within 50 kilometers of the sea. So that's not very far to be able to go to the seaside at a weekend or for your holidays, and within 2.5 kilometers of fresh water. And in fact, if we think about it, it's very difficult, unless we're dealing with desert landscapes, to have a city that is not built on a river or the coast, because that's why cities were often developed. Take Vilnius or Kaunas on rivers. Take Riga on a river, take Tallinn on the coast, take Tartu on a river, take Edinburgh on the coast, Glasgow on a river, etc., etc. So when you start thinking about it, yes, every city almost is a coastal city with ports and harbours, or it's on a river, and sometimes with ports and harbours, and industry, and so on. So most cities are built on rivers or the coast, and we've often turned our backs on them. We've canalised them, we regulated them, polluted them, built harbours on them, put industry, and made it very difficult often to get access to them. And also, the rivers and the water are much more volatile and and changeable than things like forests and parks and so on. So there are many kind of risks associated with water. So nowadays, as ports have moved out of cities to become container ports, often somewhere else, and we've had a big concerted efforts in many countries to clean up the pollution of rivers, and in fact, in some places, to renaturalize rivers and to open them up if they were buried in pipes and things like this. So there's been a big opportunity and many projects to revitalize water landscapes with huge new developments, great big restoration like London Docklands from the 80s onwards. So this is really why Europe is a perfect place to study this subject. So the project had 9 institutions and at its height about 90 researchers, or over 90, with many different universities. So it was led by University of Exeter, which has a special centre for oceans and health, and has psychology and so on. Then there was the Dutch Institute for Health. Lund University was all about health. Istituto Superiore di Sanità in Italy, all about health. World Health Organization, all about health. IS Global in Barcelona, also about public health and epidemiology. Aristotle University in Thessaloniki in Greece. Mediterranean Center for Climate Change, but our one in Estonia, the Eesti Maulikol as it's called. And that's the only one that dealt with urban planning, public space, outdoor space, landscape design, and all of the things which are actually really important when it comes to making blue spaces accessible and usable to capture those benefits. So it was funded by the EU under the Horizon 2020 programme, and it was one of those big kinds of projects with 6 million euros to spend. It was launched in January 2016, and it ran officially until the end of December of 2020, but with a big legacy beyond. We're still actually analysing and publishing results. There was a paper just came out last week from one of the projects, and we've got some in the pipeline. We're applying and refining the various tools that we've provided, which I'll be talking about, and translating them into other languages. So many of the tools, one particular one that I'll talk about, is being translated into Chinese, and a web tool developed in China because they can't access the sort of websites outside of China because of the great firewall of China. So we have to do things specially for China, but there's a huge market for all this kind of stuff. So this is how it all happened, and unlike many projects which came to a grinding halt, this one has kind of taken on a life of its own, and I'm very frequently talking in one shape or another of this project and some of the things that we talked about. So what do we mean by blue space? Let's be first of all. So it can be natural, of course, the sea, lake, river, or it can be man-made. It can be canals. It can be man-made lake, and it can be rural or urban. But although the project focused on the more urban ends of things. It's an outdoor environment, so we're not talking about indoor swimming pools and spas and those kinds of things. And of course it's featuring water and accessible to people in some way. So we could have a rural coastal, like that top left picture, like a lovely beach where people want to go and sunbathe and swim in the sea. It can be rural inland, like a reservoir, bottom left. It can be coastal urban, like many cities like Klaipėda, or it can be Barcelona or Brighton, you know, those, or Pärnu, those kind of places, or inland urban, like any city on a river or a port, etc. Now, the important thing that structured the research is to have a conceptual model, understanding the benefits and how we then achieve them. So if we start with our goal, which is population level health and well-being. So how do we maximize the positive impacts of urban blue spaces. So that is going to be dependent on having some form of contact with blue space. And it can be indirect, where you can see it from a window or passing by, that kind of thing. Or it can be direct, where you're at the blue space and perhaps you're at the water, in the water, next to the water, under the water, over the water. You've got some kind of direct, possible, real contact with it, physical contact, or you're very much at the water. And then you've got those activities in the blue space, which can be, of course, activities in the water. It can be swimming, it can be rowing, it can be sailing, or along the edge of the water, running, walking, sitting, watching the view, on the beach, sunbathing, where the water is a crucial element of that landscape. So we have to have some form of contact and activities. And that is going to be dependent in turn on how much blue space there is, the quality of that blue space, and for that matter, where it is, to ensure that accessibility. Because blue spaces are not scattered about everywhere. You know, if you've got a city, it's either on the coast, so the blue space is on one edge, and the city comes back from that, or if it's a river, which is rather good, it's up the middle of the city. So you often have good access to the city from the centre, to the water, but from the periphery, perhaps not so good. Whereas with a park, you can dot parks around kind of regularly. You know, every region of a city can have its own park, but the water spaces are rather limited by geography. But we have to deal with that, and not only the quantity, but the quality. How accessible are they? How safe are they? How attractive are they? What facilities do they have? Etc. Which all brings it into the realm of urban planning and landscape design and infrastructure development and so on. And ultimately it's about how we design our cities to maximize the benefits and the potential that are offered by these blue spaces. But we have to understand it that compared with forests and parks and gardens, blue spaces are very volatile. They are affected by storms and extreme events, whether it's massive rainstorms like happened in Valencia and that area just a couple of weeks ago, whether it's sea level rise, whether it's storm surges, and it's pollution events sometimes. Things like this happen as well. So water has many risks associated with it, and one of the biggest causes of death is drowning. So we can't just say, yeah, make every water body accessible, because you might be opening up to all sorts of risks. So we have to deal with that. But you can see when we're talking about activities, quantity and quality, urban planning and infrastructure, this is the realm of taking the theory of and looking at, you know, what is it all about: physical activity, mental health, psychological well-being, physiological well-being, social well-being, and making it possible to be maximized by urban dwellers. So that's where the urban design, landscape architecture, and to some extent architecture, and the interaction between the built space and the space between the buildings and the contacts and structure of the city and transport and everything all come together. So it was very much an interdisciplinary research, already pointed out. It had environmental psychologists, epidemiologists, public health specialists, health geographers, landscape architects. Who else was involved? Probably that was the general range of expertise. It was conducted in Europe, but also with some additional studies. So one big study was of 18 countries, and it was mostly Europe, but it also included Canada, Hong Kong, and Australia, to take it outside of Europe. So we started with lots of systematic reviews. What is the evidence base? What do we know already? Where are the gaps, obviously? That kind of thing you always do with research. There's also secondary survey data out there. You can start to look at the distribution of blue spaces, the distribution of people, at the health inequalities, and you can start to look at those kind of associations at a sort of city level using health geography kind of studies. A large international survey of 18 countries and how people use blue spaces and what benefits they get from it regarding their physical, mental and social health and well-being. And there's a paper, one of the papers from that was published just last week. And then a series of social and structural interventions, experimental landscape design interventions, which I'll be spending most of the lecture talking about, actually. And we also built the Blue Health Toolbox, which I'll also be explaining further. And these are all tools which are publicly available. Many of them are web-based or downloadable or linked with things like geographic information systems and so on. We also conducted some virtual reality lab-based experiments. There's quite a bit of interest by some of the researchers to say, well, not everybody can go to blue spaces in reality. Older people, maybe bedbound or housebound or whatever, they can't go to the blue space. Can we bring it to them virtually? So there is an actual part of the project, which I can't go into, which was looking at that and bringing a virtual water experience to people in care homes, for example. We also did some future scenario planning. What kind of blue spaces? What happens if we get this kind of change to the city, to the climate, to water, etc., etc.? And all of that was kind of wrapped up. And loads of engagement and dissemination, which is continuing to this day, all over the place. So these social and structural interventions. So this was using a concept, which I'll come into, called urban acupuncture. And we did 5 interventions, 2 in Estonia, 1 in Spain, 1 in Portugal, and 1 in the UK. And these were live experiments where we constructed, through community interaction and co-design, we constructed small featured elements, kind of edge structures on the edge between the water and the land in these particular locations, different kinds of water. So redesigning a place to improve access, and then we assessed the physical and mental health impact on the local residents from before the intervention and then after the intervention. So this was how we did this experiment, and we used money from the project, in some cases together with other funding, to construct these interventions. So this was really fantastic experimental project that we were able to do. It was really interesting. And then from all of that, we produced the Urban Blue Spaces book, which is the recommended reading that was already on the screen. Urban Blue Spaces, Planning and Design for Health and Well-being. And also, as part of the work, and to provide inspiring projects and examples, we've compiled a website called Blue Profiles, where we've got close to 100 projects from around the world, which we've critically evaluated, and they come into different categories. And you can explore that. And there's many of them are also presented in the Urban Blue Spaces book, again, under different categories. So this is all to help planners and designers to get inspired and to think about what kind of projects you might do in a certain place. So these are all so best practices, lots of illustrations and examples and so on. Now, the Blue Health Toolbox, which is one of the key outputs from this project, has 4 new tools. And apart from one, they all start with Blue Health something. So we have the Blue Health Behavioral Assessment Tool, which is BBAT for short. The Blue Health Environmental Assessment Tool, or BEAT for short. The Blue Health Community Level Survey, or BCLS, it doesn't make a kind of word. And then, I don't know why it isn't called the Blue Health Decision Support Tool, but for some reason it isn't. and there's a decision support tool. So the first two were developed by my colleagues and I in Tartu, and then the BCLS was developed by colleagues in Exeter, and the decision support tool by colleagues at the World Health Organization office in Bonn. And they were all worked together so that what you've got is essentially to be able to find out all different aspects about the place before you do a project, and then after you've done it, as a kind of post-occupancy evaluation or assessment. So they're designed to help planners, architects, communities to evaluate and monitor blue space use, to do assessments of pre and post a project, to inform the development and design of that blue infrastructure. And all of them have been developed, tested, validated, to be robust, transparent, and repeatable. So we know that they will actually produce very good results. So the first of these is the BBAT or BBAT. So this is assessing what people do at a site. So it's a systematic observation of who is doing what, where on a particular area. It might be along a river, it might be in a park, it might be on a beach, it might be anywhere. And it's mapping kinds of behaviors. These can be passive, so people sitting, standing, lying. And this is where actually you're getting a lot of the mental health benefits are from just like chilling there, sitting, gazing at the view, winding down, de-stressing, etc. Or active behaviors, which can be jogging and running and playing games, or it can be swimming and rowing and such like in the water. So you're identifying who does what where to give a complete picture of that particular site. And it can compare different groups, so you can take men and women, you can take older people, middle-aged people, young adults, teenagers, kids. You can do individuals and groups, and you can do the primary activities and secondary activities. And so from this, we've developed an observation protocol where you can do a sampling regime of, say, certain mornings, certain lunchtimes, certain afternoons, certain evenings, weekdays, weekends, over the different seasons. And then you can put it all together and you can do statistical analysis spatially and aspatially. And it's all built in Geographic Information System, which is QGIS, Quantum GIS, which is free to download. And there's some scripting that you can get and put it into if you download the GIS, you can put the scripting in, and it gives you drop-down menus. And if you have a tablet computer with a stylus, you can go on the screen and you can say, beep, that's a lady on this particular place, and she's, okay, older person, and she's walking with a dog, and she's with a friend, and they are chatting, and over here, there's a young boy, and he's on his bicycle, and he's with some friends, and they're cycling along. And from that, you can build, hundreds or if thousands of data points, and it brings this rich picture of the life of the space. Do it beforehand. Oh, it's not really, there's no older people here. There's very few women compared with men. Where are the kids? You can identify the gaps, and then you can change the site and make it better, and then see if everybody comes afterwards. And I'll show you some of the results of that. And you can create these visual geographic heat maps, which is what those coloured blobs are. And I'll come back to this particular project later. The Blue Health Environmental Assessment tool evaluates the site characteristics. So it's about its social characteristics. You can do about who's using the site and what are they doing there, not as detailed as the other tool, and what is its physical and its ecological characteristics. What condition is it in? How accessible is it? How safe is it? What are people doing there? What is the quality of the water? What kind of a state? And you evaluate it according to different domains and different aspects, and then you can rank them, and you can write comments about them, and you can all put them into a web-based tool, and that will tell you about the area. And it has 4 steps. A pre-site survey desk study, where you look at your site, you take all the surroundings, the history, accessibility, who's living around there, what else is happening around there. You do the first impressions always count a lot. So the first impressions of the site. Then an in situ terrestrial site survey, which is where these spidergram diagrams come in, and a water ecosystem assessment as well. Of course, very important if you want to know if it's a clean water and safe to go into, and so on. And then the Blue Health community level survey is about the people. So we've got what people do on the site, how the site is, now who are the people? How often do they go there? How do they feel about the site? What's their health and well-being status? So this is based on different surveys. They can be online, they can be in paper, they can be in person. You can add or subtract questions, and all the questions are from existing validated surveys. So you don't have to invent a lot of questions and end up doing it badly, because it's quite a skill in developing a questionnaire. And it builds the evidence base for your plans. So who are the people, who are your client base, who are going to be the beneficiaries of this area? How much do they already visit or not visit? And who is not visiting and why? And do their visits affect their health? Are they getting physical activity there? Are they getting de-stressed? And is it helping with their social helping? For example, are older people less isolated because they can go out and meet their friends and spend time on that space and so on? Then the decision support tool is really all about understanding the risks and the benefits. So it's aimed at planners, authorities, engineers, who often deal with blue infrastructure of the engineering variety, businesses and the public. And you enter it by looking at certain different types rather of blue spaces, like marine coast, riverfront, urban front, lakefront, blue in green, so that might be ponds and lakes in parks, or ornamental, like fountains, which are actually quite valuable in cities and are useful kinds of blue spaces. And it highlights the risks and the benefits to public health and well-being and to the environment, because quite often we might encourage people to go to that blue space, but actually it disturbs the wildlife, or it causes erosion, or it pollutes the water, or something like that. So that is a really valuable tool as well. Now, I'd like to focus quite a bit on these urban acupuncture experiments. And you're thinking, urban acupuncture? What's that all about? Has anybody heard of this term before? Acupuncture, Chinese medicine, yes. Well, it's a metaphor based on that, yeah, okay. Well, I'll explain the concept. So it's a socio-environmental theory that combines contemporary urban design with the concept of traditional Chinese acupuncture. So using small-scale interventions to transform the larger urban context. So this is the idea. So instead of going in with a mega project that costs millions of euros, and you do it all with big developers and all the rest of it, and it turns out as a disaster, of course, not always, but you do something small, you can test it. If it works, you can do more of it. If it doesn't work, you didn't waste a whole load of money. You know, we're talking about things that we had a budget of like 20,000 euros for, which is not very much when you're talking about general kinds of projects. So you're putting something in the right place, like the needle in acupuncture is the right place in your foot or somewhere, to affect the whole body. That's the general idea. It came about from, first of all, from this Barcelonan architect and urbanist Manuel de Sola Morales, and then developed further by a Finnish architect and social theorist Marco Casagrande. That's not a very Finnish name, actually. It's more like Italian name. But he's very Finnish. He's the guy at the bottom. He looks totally Finnish. And the one above is Manuel de Sola Morales. And so it moves away, as I say, from massive urban renewal projects. And it's particularly relevant in the global south and places where they don't have these kind of money, and you want to do something that's a bit cheap and experimental, and you can work with communities, this kind of thing. More localized, community approach, maybe a bit more democratic, bottom up, rather than necessarily top down, and cost effective to give a respite to urban dwellers. So that's what it's all about. Now, I'll take you through a few examples of what we kind of mean by this. So here's one example. It's in Ljubljana in Slovenia, and it's a pavilion in the center of the city on this riverbank, the Ljubljanica River. And you can see it's been canalized, it's got these embankments, it's got these steep slopes, and it's got railings. You can't get down close to the water, you can only see it through the trees. But by making this small pavilion with a green roof of creepers and some little steps you can sit on, and a protruding cantilevered deck, you can get down away from the street and down towards the water. And you can see it's very popular in the hot streets and so on there. Or this one is in Amsterdam, and it's an adjustable adult playground of hammocks and things that you can adjust where they are. That's why you can move them around and make them in different places. And it's literally a place to hang out. I mean, literally, you're hanging out there, aren't you? And that's, again, very small, very cheap, and you can really observe what kind of effects it has. This one is in north of Barcelona, a place called Vinaros, and it's this microcostas, and it's a coastline where the beach is rock, very sharp rock. You can't really walk and sunbathe and go in the sea there. So these architects built this wooden decking system with these kind of pyramids which you can clamber on, you can lean against, you can sunbathe on it, you can picnic on it, and it's really giving access to the water, which was not possible when you see what the quality of this very rocky, sharp coast is. And this is another nice little edge structure, Jardin des Rives in France, where you've got a more natural edge to a water body, a river, but it was quite eroded. You can see how the vegetation is eroded. And this way, you've got a nice little spot to just lie, sit back, relax. You could put a kayak or canoe in the water. You could dip into it. You could bring something out of the water. Very cheap, but very welcoming. And it's always saying, well, here's safe to go to, and you're not disturbing the nature by using that, and it's protecting the edge of the river as well. So I'm going to take you through these different projects that we did and show the different ways of approaching them and what was the results of it. The project that had the most concentrated development and the most publications out of it was one at Plymouth called Teats Hill. Plymouth is a city in the southwest of the UK. And this little area was a rundown park within a deprived community. So there was social housing, there were social problems of the people there. And the city council was wanting to improve these deprived areas and had a series of projects. And this was one that we then worked on with the city council. A small budget to renovate it. They didn't have any money to make a big project, and it really didn't need it. Good possibilities for local community involvement, because they already had some people who are kind of activating the community and working with the kids and so on. And we developed good collaboration between the city and we, the Blue Health researchers. So this is a kind of map of Plymouth. It's a naval base for the Royal Navy, and it's got a lot of kind of inlets of the sea that come into the city. And that's the area where the project is, and I'll just point to it, more or So it's in the city centre, and this was the plan before the development. So it was just a bit of green, a rundown play area, that's those kind of pink bits, and basketball court or ball court. There was a lot of vegetation kind of growing over the edge, so you couldn't really see the water from the land. There was an old slipway that used to have boat launching, but was broken and was blocked, and the road down to that was filled with cars, and it really spoiled the access. So the water access was very poor, and it was, run down, car parking and all these things, so it needed a lot of work. And this is it before the development. The tide is out, it's tidal, so the sea was out. That's the old broken slipway, that thick vegetation that was covering a nice little cliff. The beach is a bit stony, but it could be used. And that's all the cars blocking the road. And then just this grass. And in the background, there's the houses, which are where the deprived community in that area. So how did we develop it? So then first we got the project agreed. So I went and, well, some of us did a site visit, and I went there and had talked to some people and got a few bits of ideas, walked around it and thought, what could we do here? Yes, I think it would be quite nice to do something right on the edge of where the land and the water come together, and to make a little theatre. I called it an amphitheatre, but strictly speaking, it's a theatre. An amphitheatre is right the way around, not like half a one. Right at the point where the cliff and the slipway and the water area meets the land, nestling down in this little kind of hollow, and then to upgrade the play area, maybe with a ship kind of theme, and one or two other simple things. That was a very, very rough sketch, not really to scale. I did it in the evening when I was there, went to a meeting the following day with lots of community members and so on, and I showed this and said, well, here's, an initial idea, what do you think about it? And they all said, yes, we love it. Okay, well, it's not really developed yet, we don't know how much it would cost and the practicality, so let's take it forward. So then there were various activities, and the ideas were put forward, and there was fun days with the people there, and we linked the project ideas into that, came up with a bit more of a plan. One of my PhD students, he spent a lot of time there. He did these analyses, this Blue Health Environmental Assessment Tool, the Blue Health Behavior Assessment Tool observations, and the survey was done of the residents. So we had all of this pre-development data, and then it was all discussed with the local people, and there was lots of ideas came in, some ideas stayed, some went, it was changed, it grew, it went smaller, etc. All of these things happened, and the whole thing kind of evolved and developed. And there were these different activities. So that's on the site where there was all things happening. There's some people discussing it with locals. We made a model so they could see in 3 dimensions how it would be, because otherwise it's not so easy to follow and understand. And so there were lots of discussions with everybody, and eventually there was a good consensus reached that basically the idea that I came up with was okay. We couldn't do anything too remarkable with the play area, there just wasn't the money. But then we went forward with it. And so there were these discussions, etc., with local residents. So then that's the final design. So the play area has a new play structure based on a ship, but not as dramatic as I imagined it might be. It was just too expensive. And the open air theatre is in, and the vegetation was cleared off the edges, and the cars were prevented from parking down the road, and there was some modification to some fencing to stop dogs getting where they shouldn't be, and that kind of thing. And that is the small open air theatre that was finished, and you can see how it's right on the edge, and you can go down the repaired slipway a bit and down to the beach easily, and it offers all sorts of possibilities. You can sit on it, obviously, have events on it, just use the steps to climb up and down. It could be even do a bit some skateboarding on it. You know, the imagination is the only limiting thing about what you could do in that space. And they have, in fact, had some events, church services and some concerts and things have taken place there. And it proved to be really popular. And that's how it looks nestled down on that edge point, you see, between the land and the water. And I can see where the play area is, but it's a bit difficult to work it out. So, and you can see where there was this edge and this little cliff and how you get the views out and so on. So this is a little bit of the results. So this is the before and the after. So on the left, well, you can see that dense pattern is just a path running through the site, which was basically people were walking to and fro. So there was always a lot of use of that. But you can see the hotspots are different on the two images, with the open-air theatre and the play area getting hotter. And when we looked at the same period in 2017 and then 2018, when it was constructed over the winter of 2017, we could see that there were 2,181 observations in the period, and it went up to 5,027 the following year. So the use had more than doubled at that time. And we could see changes in the pattern of physical activity. It's a wider range of activities, and more of some and fewer of others. And this is, or the bottom one is the different pattern between passive and active ones, and then the one at the right is above is the water activities, which were very few, and how much more there was, and more range of water activities afterwards. And there's a very good paper that came out in Landscape and Urban Planning, which goes into this in great, great detail. And if you want to follow it up, you can chase that up. The second project was in Tartu, a place called Annekanal. Annelin, is a region of Soviet-era housing. I'll mention it. So this was an urban artificial lake or canal used for swimming and fishing in summer and skating and ice fishing in the winter. Near the biggest Soviet-era housing complex in Tartu, where 30,000 people live, about 1/3 of the population. Parts of the area were very well used and overused and very crowded, and other parts of the area, you couldn't really get to the water. So we thought it would be a good idea to change that. We had good collaboration with Tartu municipality, and we did a student project with our own landscape architecture students. We did those site observations to select the specific site. We did the beat survey, and we did the BCLS survey, and we did stakeholder consultation to come up with different ideas and select the one. So that's this canal that was going to be a longer one, originally, a rowing canal, but it never got completed. And that's how it looks with the typical, you're familiar with this, Soviet housing blocks. I don't need to show you what they're like. And then this was the baseline observations of what people, how they were using the place. And we could see that on one side, there's a path along, but there's not really many people going there, and it could be a nice place to get access in a more quiet way to the water. And that was how it came as a hotspot analysis or a heat map. And so we decided to take that area where that arrow's pointing. So we did some student proposals and a design workshop, and the idea of some decking going out to the water came up, and we worked with some local activists and things like this. And then we came up with some design options for voting by the public, and there's a big shopping centre near there where all the residents of Annelin go. So we did the surveys there, we had these different ideas, and we said, please vote for your favourite, and we showed a little map of where it would be and how it would look. And this was the one that won number B, and it was then developed up by my colleagues and priced up and went out to tender and everything and had to be a bit modified because of the cost and some issue to do with foundations. Anyway, we got it constructed, and in the winter, over the winter of 2019, so that's how it looks freshly in the winter, with a sort of sitting area and the deck going to the edge of the water, and you can see it on the right. In the winter, you can get down onto the frozen surface. In the summer, you walk through it, and then you get it on the edge through the reeds. And what we found was that actually, you don't get many people going there, because when they do, a few people go there, nobody else goes. It's not a place that gets lots and lots of people. It's quite private, but it means you can go there and get a bit more. So it turned out a bit differently than we thought it might do in that regard. So when we did do some observations, we found there weren't that many people using it because not many people could use it or would be willing to at the same time. The third project is in Tallinn, Kopli Rand, a beach, urban beach, used a bit for swimming and fishing and ice fishing in the winter, in again a relatively poor area of Tallinn. And this beach is well away from a much more developed and managed beach park, and so it was attracting more antisocial activities, but it was very close to a residential area. Again, good collaboration with Tallinn City, and once again we deployed the site observations to select the specific site, and then surveys and stakeholder consultation and the same sort of ideas. And this is in a shopping centre, and there you've got some students collecting surveys, and we've also got this design ideas you can see on that easel there. And again, there were some ideas that came out and then were developed and then were asked to vote on them. Option B was the preferred one, and so it was supplying improved resting and sunbathing, using an old slipway and some old concrete blocks, which we then put wood on to make a kind of surface. So you can sit and sunbathe in the places that were most popular and perceived as safe. And also a bigger platform to rest, gather and socialize near the old, again, broken slipway that is used for swimming and could create it additionally. So this is the main intervention. And you can see it's quite inspired by that one in France, this sort of stepping, sloping deck, but it parallels the slipway. And it goes to the edge of the water, but not in the water, because you would have to have a marine license to do that. And it was, again, constructed together with these wooden platforms that were fastened to these old concrete blocks. And people had been using them and sitting on them, and we knew they were used, so we put those on. And as soon as we did, people started to go there and start to sit on them and make use of them. So this is the before and after use patterns from the observations. And you can see there were 3 warmish spots before, and then we built the interventions, and you can see the new hotter spots, and the little red dots or little squares or shapes are the intervention. The main one, of course, is on that the slipway, and then the rest of them are these platforms fastened to those blocks. And they became very popular. And then we also interviewed the people, the residents, and found out how they thought about it and what they like about them and their feedback. And they all said, oh, it's great. And the women said, oh, we feel much safer going there now because there aren't these men drinking beer anymore. And we feel welcome there, and it's safe, and we like to go there. And so we have a lot more people doing it. So that one, we're still writing it up, and there will be a paper coming out in the beginning of next year, hopefully. The fourth project was quite different, and it was in a place behind Barcelona, inland from Barcelona, called Rubi, and it was an interesting thing called Can Moritz. and that's an old spring. And it was used, it gets hot in summer, obviously, in Spain. And what people used to do was to find a spring which came of cold water out of the hillside and make a kind of sitting area where you can get this cold water, and it gives you a kind of air conditioning, and you can dabble your feet in it and so on. And it was built by some landowners, the Moritz family, who do brewery in Barcelona. And it was then abandoned. It was built in the 1920s. It was abandoned, it got overgrown, it got a bit broken, and then it was suddenly discovered by an NGO group, and they thought, maybe we could renovate this. And then some people said, yeah, but nearby there's an area which is sort of used by people across a little stream, and it's a bit, needs a bit of work on it. There's some problems there. Let's fix up the whole place and make it a nice little place to go to. So it's next to a sort of urban development. In Spain, they build these out-of-town urban developments called an urbanazione, which are really strange. And it was in this valley with a seasonal stream, because you don't get rain all year round there. It's rainy in the winter, and then it's dry in the summer. And there was some local use and some misuse. So we had good collaboration with this Ruby municipality, and we used a student project of the Polytechnic University of Barcelona, the landscape architect department, using what's called the Steinitz method of site analysis, where it's named after from Carl Steinitz, who's a famous landscape architecture professor from Harvard University. And you take lots of pictures of the area, and then you ask people to rank those pictures according to how they like them or don't like them. And then you do an analysis of where those pictures were, and then you can come up with a kind of site analysis. And it was done with implementing with local environmental NGO, who then took over the management, and volunteers. So this was the public participation event. That's the team in the middle there. 2 researchers, a professor, and some students. And then you can see they've got all these pictures, and people are ranking them with coloured stickers, red, yellow, orange, and so on. And that is related to this plan. So the red areas were the places that they didn't like at all. They're abandoned, unattractive, insecure. And on the right, the green ones are attractive, green, and natural. So the place that's number 1 was identified as the place to do the intervention and put in the work. So then there was some work done with students who did a project at the university, and they came up with grandiose ideas that couldn't be constructed. That red dot is this spring, and then you see the area with the zone with the green line is very close to it, and a bridge was constructed from that area over to it. And then in detail, you can see a pattern of blue circles. So these are painted circles on asphalt and wood logs painted blue. This is glow-in-the-dark paint, actually. And this was then implemented. You can see it going on there with some volunteers and so on. And this is the actual spring. That's how it was found, and some branches pulled out of it. And then it was reconstructed. So you climb down into this. The spring comes into this trough. And then there's these sort of brick and concrete sofas, which you could bring cushions down. You could bring your picnic. You could bring some wine and cool it off in the water and have a nice little kind of resting time, getting cooled off in the hot summer. And that all links together. But what we found then was we had students go back and do these observations, and there were, for one reason or another, it was very slow use, low levels, and we didn't really get a lot of major results out of that one, except just saying it was a really nice project. And that was it renovated. So the final project is in Portugal, in the town of Guimarães, and it was this Costa Curos park, a park along a small river that had been once agricultural land, made in a park in the 1990s, I think, or the early 2000s, a bit simple and a bit run down. There was a small stream, and then there was a pond that was a bit stagnant, because they hadn't changed the water very easily, filled with old sculptures, hideous fish sculptures, very unattractive. Nobody went nearby it, they avoided it. So once again, we used students from the landscape architecture program at the Universidad de Trás-os-Montes y Alto Douro at Villarreal, or UTAD for short. And in Guimarães, they have a landscape laboratory. The municipality has this place called a landscape laboratory. They do lots of work with the local residents and schools and so on to come up with ideas for how to develop the cities. Very advanced, really. So the park is with that dotted line around it on the aerial picture, and that's the picture of this stagnant green pond with nothing around the edges and those horrible floaty fish. And basically it was very sad. So my colleague over there, sorry, his just names went out of my head. What's he called? Never mind. They were doing it in, and had people coming in, and then they had these posters, and what they did was develop planting around the pond to make it more attractive, and they got the school kids to paint totem poles with different designs and things and put them all around there. And that was the little design, very, very simple, rings of posts to make it stand out and some vegetation, and they implemented it. Federico, that was his name. And they did it with people going and doing the planting and putting the posts in, so it was all with people doing it. And then that was it firstly constructed. This was a bit affected by the pandemic, so that we had to stop it and do it and then finalize it after the pandemic and then open it up again, which was a bit of a problem. And then you can see the before and after. So you can see there are some hot spots, including a play area, but you can't, there's nothing anywhere near that water body, and now there is. That's it. So that's it there. And so then we can see that it's drawn people to use more of the park and to make much more use about it. So the resources that we have then, we have the book, which is, you can see from that symbol at the bottom there, is open access. So you can all download it as PDF from the Routledge website and make great use of it. And then the Blue Health Tools website, which you can see the address of there, and you can go into it, explore it. You can use the Blue Health Environmental Assessment tool. You can download the scripting for the behavior assessment tool. And in the Blue Health project website, you can find and download the survey, and you can also find the links to the decision support tool. So that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. And now I think we can open it to questions, and I think I'm basically exactly on time.